Thank you, everyone. I think it's high time we started. I think you can see my screen. Is it up?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, you can see it, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Actor. Thank you, Dr. Mrs. Salau, and thank you, every one of us. I can see a lot of people that are joining us within Nigeria and out of Nigeria. It seems that each topic is timely. Actually, coal mining and coal fire have been one of the things that seems to be actually not in the burning front of in terms of environmental management. This time around, coupled with what actually happened last week in Enugu. So there has been some issues, series, some questions that possibly show that what happened in Enugu might actually also be linked to whole scene of mammal formation. Let's go forward. Today we have, we need to run fast because of some other meetings that are also coming up in NMGS. I think today we'll be dealing with the coal mine and coal fire. Actually, that's actually where we'll be dwelling, and some of the environmental disasters that is actually associated with this. Okay.
Yes.
This discussion will be actually looking at our introduction. We go through our introduction about the coal. We'll look at the global perspective of it, come down to Nigeria perspective, then look at the disaster management. Then we'll look at the coal mining, the occurrences of actually what we have in Nigeria, and we maybe brief history of it. Then we'll look at the coal ranks and how is actually the kind of ranges of ranks we have in Nigeria. Also, we'll look at the coal fires worldwide, and we'll try to see is any coal fire in Nigeria and how big and small is it actually being. Then we'll look at what actually causes this coal fire in the mines actually, or on the surface, and also we'll look at the impacts. Then we'll go about the mitigation and some of the management issues and some other research work that people have actually done to see how a coal fire could actually be mitigated. Then we'll run to the conclusion. That looking at the global perspective of coal, it is very clear that having understood some of the issues that actually associated with coal, environmentally, socially, and economically, that the coal cannot actually at this time, we say that it's something that we need to actually relegate in a very near future. Because if you look at the way most countries are actually depending on coal, you know, we understand that it is one of the most abundant available fossil fuel that actually provides substantial part of energy needs worldwide. Because at this time, if actually that the coal can approximately give us about 34% of the total global energy as of 2022, that would tell you that coal is not something you can actually phase out. So we need to actually look at this from a very practical point of view and see how we can manage its associated risk in terms of environment. That is it. So we're also going to look at the global coal fire and also some of the emission as is associated with carbon dioxide emission. Now, for us to understand that coal is not just something we can actually phase out in the very near future. If you look at the world record as of today, the world record as of today is showing that the top 5 coal-fired power generating countries as of 2020, is China, India, US, Japan, and South Korea. And if you look at the board here, you can understand that over 61% of India's energy mix is coming from coal, generating up to 4,631 terawatt per hour. So you can look at it and see that it is not something that is 10% or 20%. So 61% is actually very huge, you know. So topping, you know, one of the world's largest coal-fired power generating country. followed by India, which is actually producing about 947, and almost 70% depends on, of the energy capacity depends on this, followed by also UX. In short, UX, one of the mines in the UX has a proven reserve of almost 1.9 billion tons and generating up to 774. Japan also has also 274. Then next year in South Korea. In South Korea, one single plant in South Korea also give about 6,000 megawatts. So in all these plants, you can see worldwide that we have over 8,500 coal-fired power generating facility. And this is actually huge and something that will take a very long time for us to actually, shift our pace or our position of fossil fuel to another energy source. Okay, coming down to Nigeria, coal was actually something that was discovered in a long term, but in one way or the other, I wouldn't say that Nigerian coal actually stopped because we actually don't want to, or our coal, we are looking at the GH emissions or some of the gases. But the issue of Nigerian coal has been oppression. It has been management. There have been a lot of issues actually surrounding it. When it's actually discovered since 1909, the generation of coal in Nigeria rose closely to about almost a million tons. The major mines, that of Okpara and Onyama mines, which are actually situated in Enugu, and some of the surface mines, which is Owupa and Orupa and Okaba, actually was also operated by old NNC, which is a Nigeria Coal Corporation. Because of some technicalities, some British came in and it was operated for high wall and long wall within the Okpara and Onyama area. And after the Civil War, there was a kind of a decline in production of coal, and that declination actually continued till date. Most of the coal production, most of the materials actually used by the old railway stations and railway operation. But now most of it actually are not in existence, and coupled with the discovering of oil in the 50s, it actually declined. So most of actually what we are focusing on is on oil and gas. So this actually affected coal production, seems to be neglected in Nigeria. Even as of date, coal has been actually deregulated through the regulation. Government has actually allowed private sectors to actually come in. Then, if you look at here, you find out that Nigeria is actually blessed at some coal resources coming up from all the way from the whole of Anambra Basin. You can see where we'll have some of the low concentration of coal and where we'll have high concentration. High concentration of coal in Nigeria, if you look at this mineral map here, the black dots here are the coal locations, some of the states that actually have coal. Major concentration is in Enugu State, which is the Anambra Basin. That if you look at this map, you can, if you look at this map, you can see that most of the Anambra Basin, especially the lower coal measures. The lower coal measures, the upper coal measures, and the phosphate sandstones are the makeup of the Mamu Formation. This is actually where we'll have the Boyoga district. We'll have the Boyoga district within this. You can look at the map by the right. And we'll have the Okaba, followed by the Yoruba area. We'll have the Eximo, we'll have the Unyama and the Okpara. These two mines were actually the underground mine that was actually operated by NCC that actually given closely to about 1 million tons per annum. And here is the surface mine that was also operated also, and Okaba area. So you can look at this, you find out that much concentration and the most economic coal within the Anambra Basin actually concentrated within the upper coal measures. Okay. So if you look at the Anambra Basin as a whole, we have comfortably within 250 to 300 million tons within the Anambra Basins as a whole, and some of the inferred reserves, which is actually made up of the major ones are the Enugu concentration, the Ezimo, the Ini, the Oboyoga, the Okaba, and the Upa area are the major concentration. Looking at the dashboard here, you can see that at least for sure, we can comfortably talk about 250 million tons in reserve, following most of the work that actually been done within the basin. And in total, Nigeria, we're talking about reserve here now, but not resources, minimum of about 639 million. And it is very clear that a lot of places are not actually being drilled or actually being explored, more than 65% of it. So we are looking at about 2.7 billion in estimate of Nigerian coal resources. Then look at this, you can see it is very important we understand the ranking of coals, because most of the coal fired actually has relationship with the coal ranks, because you can look across here, you find out that the moisture content actually decreases across the line, and also the heating value increases across the line. When you're talking about the high moisture content, it actually decreases. The high moisture content can actually be found within the lignite and the sub-bituminous coal. Then when you're talking about the carbon, the fixed carbon and the carbon content and the heating of capability of coal to burn, we are talking about the bituminous and that of anthracite coal. So the ranks of coal has a very direct relationship with that of temperature formation, the pressure formation. The lower temperature and pressure actually, we are talking about the lignite. Then we have bituminous and anthracite of high temperature and pressure formation. So this is also indicative of how some of these materials could actually be used. The majority of the coal is actually channeled towards power generation and cement manufacturing industries and so on. Then two major methods are actually involved in mining coal worldwide. In Nigeria, two major methods, though mainly the open cast has actually been utilized here. We'll talk about the surface mining. For surface mining, involves that of the open cast method, excavation, while that of underground mining, talk about the root and pillar and that of the long wall. What actually suggests the method depends primarily on the depth of the coal, which is the stripping ratio of the coal, talking about what is the coal seam thickness to that of the overburden ratios. So these actually determine the method one can actually use in mining coal. And most of the coal we have here are surface, especially the one within the upper coal measures. So whenever coal goes beyond 55, 60, 70 meters, most of the time the long wall, the underground, the long wall of the can actually be utilized. So that's why you see most of the fires coming from the open cast, because sometimes some of the illegal miners or some people that are not capable of applying the right methods actually mine this coal and leave it open. Okay, if we look at this is the global coal production with relationship with coal fire worldwide. If you look at the highest production we have here coming from the China, the India, the US, the Indonesia, and Australia. And this is also suggesting, the relationship of most of the coal fires we've actually gotten from US. The documented ones records are more than 93 coming from the surface coal fires, from the surface mining. And in Eastern India, which is actually the densest concentration of non-coal fire, we have 68 of them, coming from a Jiharia coal field. And also in China, China actually loses so much coal to coal fire annually, over 200 million metric tons per annum, which is, you convert that, you'll understand what they're actually losing per annum. Also Indonesia. So if you look at this, you find out that the major coal fires are coming from actually the highest producers of coal. Then why do coal burns? Is the question we need to understand why coal burns. Four major attributes when it comes to fire tetrahedron. We'll talk about the oxygen, we'll talk about the fuel, we'll talk about the heat, we'll talk about the chain reactions. Coal actually burned by itself, which is actually known as the spontaneous combustion capacity of coal. And when coal actually exposed to air, naturally they undergo oxidations, forming CO2 and CO, and from there they produce heat. Definitely coal will actually burn. So also when coal is raised to some certain temperature, reaching up to 35 to 40, there's every tendency that coal will automatically be ignited. So most of the coal fields you see, actually, most of the fires come from indigenous fire. That is, most of the fires you see are spontaneous kind of heating. So, but the issue is when you understand the fire triangles or the fire tetrahedra, it is very important to use them and also fight coal. When you expose coal to certain heat, certain temperature, coal itself is fuel. So fuel is flammable matter that also support the combustion, and the oxygen, which is actually needed to sustain combustion. Once it reacts with the burning fuel, what happens is that it releases carbon dioxide and produces heat. And as the heat is being added, external energy that is necessary for the ignition, then it maintains the fire. So this is actually the reason why definitely coal burns. Then two major causes of coal fire is actually coming from the nature. The natural cause and that of the human causes. The natural causes is as a result that coal, when exposed to erosion or subsidence event or some strikes from lightning or ignited by wildfire and all that, coal can actually catch fire and that will start burning. Also from some human causes, which can come out from result from igniting coal pits or regular extraction or resulting from illegal mining or during transportation or poor handling and storage of coal. So when some of these handlings are not properly taken care of, there is every tendency that coal can actually burn. Then sufficient precautions mainly that we need to look at, especially when storing coal. When storing coal domestically, domestic storage of coal is not an issue because most of the storage domestically have nothing to do with much quantity. Small quantities are actually stored. So that is minimal. But when it comes to coal-based industries, some of the industry that actually heat coals, so we need to understand that some of the mechanics and some of the management requirements in handling coals. We don't need to exceed 200 tons each, and each and the 8 feet high, because the issue is that the more you pressurize coal in terms of storage facilities, the more it tends to the heat you increase the heat and the temperature. And at some certain level, once the heat is not minimized, coal itself can ignite. So in this context, between two stocks, talking about 8 to 10 feet gap is actually okay to allow, minimal reduction in terms of pressure, So these are some of the things, apart from the convenience of also loading, and when you want to, you need to pay attention to gaps in terms of compartmentalizing some of the coal stuff, so that in terms of even one heap catches fire, it can actually transfer to other ones as a result of closeness of these heaps. Then we look at this study that was actually done by Onifade in 2018. It is very clear that, the ash, the volatile matter, the carbon content has a direct influence on spontaneous combustion of coal. So in this, it was actually concluded that, that the ash content, volatile matter, and the carbon content of samples, which were actually investigated, had so much effect towards spontaneous combustion and reliability of coal. So it actually established that the lower the ash content and higher the volatile matter and that of carbon content, there's more likely that the coal will actually burn. So when looking at the results of any coal material with some of these results, you can actually determine the volatility of coal. So it's important to pay attention to the carbon content of coal, the volatile matters of coal, actually the volatile matters in coal, and that of the ash content. So they have a direct effect on volatility of coal. If you look at this coal from Nigeria, you can see some of the inherent moisture here. About 5 samples was actually taken from different locations, and these are within the Anambra coal basins. The inherent moisture, the ash content, the volatile matter, and the fixed carbon. If you look at that of Owupa and Amasido coal, you can see that Owupa has fixed carbon of about 46.1 in average, and Amasido had that of 47.9, closely 48 in average. And if you look at also the volatile matter of that of Owupa, you can see that it is higher here, which is about 39.1. And that of Amasido is giving 38.1. So this alone will tell you the volatility, high tendency of the Owupa and Amasido coal to actually burn. So looking at this and the calorific value, if you look at the calorific value here, you see that the calorific value here is over 20. So this is actually a coal that can, that can actually burn itself. Then let's go forward. You can see some of these stockpiles. Some of the stockpiles that actually caught fire. This is an example of coal fire here we have here, also in Nigeria. So that will tell you that some of our coal can also burn. Then so then let's look at the mine fire disasters possibilities. The areas where coal mine disaster could actually occur due to coal fire include that of and fire-prone underground mines. When underground mines are prone to fire, the mines would actually sealed off areas you know, and mines where a set of areas exist which fire may occur due to breathing in of air. Mines which have extensive old workings and not sectionalized. Have mines which have thick seam working. You know, so these are some of the areas where coal disaster could actually occur. And coal fires have also been found in the following situations also. Underground fires, which have remained underground, actually, the underground fire which have become surface fires, fires in overburden dumps, fires in benches, you know, and fires in coal stacks. So these are some of the situations where coal fire can actually, you know, occur. Then what are the impacts of these fires? The impacts of these fires is very enormous. That is actually the major reasons why we are actually trying to advocate some of our concerns across this. So if you look at the impact of the coal fires can actually be of three. There are impacts on the atmospheric environment. Look at the impacts on the soil environment, the impact on the human health. You know, this gives rise, when it comes to atmospheric environment, this gives rise to safety hazards and economic losses. You know, gas poisoning, difficult in mining situations. Also, some of the hindrances occur in time of production because once the atmosphere is actually messed up, you can't actually mine in that location. In short, this impact can go as long as developing or giving rise to ghost towns. Also, when we look about the impact on soil, the impact on soil is also very huge because there's a reduction in availability of quality of surface and groundwater. Most of the organisms in the soil actually cannot survive the heat being generated from coal fire. And also inhaling some of these gases has so much impact on human health. There are more than 40 to 50 different kinds of dangerous gases, ranging from methane, ethane, gases that actually can be inhaled, and this causes some negative impact to human respiratory systems. If you look at this atmospheric environment, we can see that the most important and which is huge is the emission of the carbon dioxide. You know, the emission of carbon dioxide is very huge when it comes to the environment. It's also known that this fossil fuel has been the largest contributor to human, you know, contributor of CO2 to the atmosphere. If you look at this work that was done by Guan, you can see the number of discharges that actually, in turn, that were actually contributed to the environment by different gases. About 490,000 here. Look at this, 514,700, 300 nitrogen dioxide, and one that of 112,000 of dust. So this is very huge when it comes to atmospheric environment. Then you look at that of the soil. The soil is also affected when these fires are actually released or when they burn. It affects the plants and also causes so much damage and change to physical chemical properties of soil. It is clear that, you know, that this affects the organic matter and also the organisms and all that. So we need to guard against this. Then also in terms of the human health, the World Health Organization has actually associated the coal tar as a respiratory carcinogenic disease that is actually identified associated with coal. Also the arsenic content in coal is very dangerous. the methane gases are very dangerous. They are toxic gases that are very dangerous to human health. There are so much, even in terms of skin cancer, there are so much that actually we can talk about when we want to actually dwell on the human health issues that are related or associated with inhaling of these gases. In short, records of histories have it that most of the coal disasters that actually occurred has been as a result of the gases that are being inhaled by miners, because the issue is once there is depletion of oxygen in the atmosphere, for human beings to survive in the atmosphere, they should be having at least a minimum of 17% of oxygen, even when you are using some safety measures or you are wearing some safety coats or inhalers. Once this is actually decreased, and there is emission or release of monoxides, which is as a result of incomplete combustion of coal. When this happens, the monoxide can actually kill within some minutes. So this is a very dangerous gas we actually need to understand and guard against. Then if you look at this coal fire, we're trying to look at what actually, looking at some of the coal, the CO2 sources and the sinks. If you look at this drawing here, the carbon sources include the emission from the burning fuels, which is the forest fires and the respirations, while the carbon sink includes that of the ocean and that of the plants. So if we continue to release more of the CO2 in the atmosphere without actually trying to produce or trying to manage that of the sinks, definitely there will be much depletion of oxygen for the humans, and that is the greenhouse effect we're actually talking about. If you look at this global project report, you can see from this that we have over 18.7 gigatons per year of carbon dioxide being released. That is, the rate growth is almost at 1 to 2% every year, and it has been roughly estimated that 1% of anthropogenic CO2 emission are due to coal fires. So based on this estimation alone, this carbon dioxide released from coal fires, you can see that 0.35 per annum is actually released, which is also up to about 2% in atmospheric growth. So this is something we need to actually look at and see the emission effect and actually how to take sink building, which is we need to look at tree cultivations and carbon credits. Is this something that actually implemented, but is something that we can actually use to reduce some of the adverse effects that are actually been caused by coal in our environment? There is no way we can talk this without also looking at some of these new technologies of underground coal gasification. In short, if you look at this, coal gasification is a kind of mining coal in situ without actually trying to, do open cast and all that. It is a process which converts coal into a kind of a product gas. The UCG is an in situ kind of mining which involves introduction of the steam and warm water and oxygen into the coal seam body, and there is an ejection well which will be converted into some gas. And when this gas is actually converted, it can actually be converted for energy production. And this actually has to deal with a kind of, it has a safer way of handling our environment. But looking at actually what happened the last week in Enugu here, actually, I don't know what NMG has actually released as of date and what other professionals actually looked at. But when you look at where this actually happened, this happened, I think, on 9 of this. Okay, 9 a.m., I think in the morning through a water borehole. Some sources have it that the borehole got to about 900 and some, about 290 something meters. Some sources have it that it's at lower depth. So, but the case, something is very, very pertinent here. If you look at this coal fire, the fire that actually erupted here, it's actually said to be a kind of natural gas reservoir was actually hit during the drilling and all that. But we should also understand that the location is very close to the lower coal measures of Mamu Formation, and there is no way you can actually take out the coal seam or a kind of gold gasification into consideration also, because if the kind of rig that was actually used here is a kind of is hammer, there's every possibility that striking or lignite striking as a result of pressure at that depth, could build in some pressure and could ignite certain things coming out from coal. And also, we should also look at the depth. We need to verify actual depth where this is actually coming from. And also, if you look at before the fire started coming out, there is pressure. The video I saw on the social media, there is a kind of pressure in the air being released under pressure before the fire started coming out. So it's a lot of things we need to put in place. Could this actually be linked to the coal seam geology in that location, or could we say is a natural gas situation? So it's something we need to actually look into. Then, if we are looking at the economic implication of coal, three things actually need to be considered. The implication economically is first of all, looking at extinguishing these fires. How do you stop these fires? Stopping coal fire is not a child's play. It costs a lot of money. It costs money to actually stop this fire. And also, in terms of the carbon credit, in terms of environment, the issue is we understand that the coal production or the use of coal is not something that will stop in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, and all that. So because of this, we need to put some certain measures in place in order to take care of our environment. Why we actually emphasize on coal fire is because the coal fire is mainly not controlled, unlike some of the power plant fires. They are actually controlled. These kind of emissions are controlled. You can actually read them. You can actually monitor them, and you can actually understand the unit or the amount of emission, per year. But in terms of coal fire that are not actually controlled, you cannot actually easily determine the amount of emission they give. Then also look at the coal value, that is in terms of loss when this coal burns. When they burn, there are a lot of loss that are actually associated with them. If you look at there are some examples, few examples that I tried to cite in here. The Centrale fire, which is the major history of coal fire. In the Centrale deep state, I think Centrale actually become totally a ghost town because of a continuous burning of coal for ages in that location. The US government actually tried to stop the fire. It was estimated that over 600 million million could actually be used to stop the fire. So when compared to what could be used to actually relocate the residents and actually establish new businesses for them, it was less than $100 million. So I think it was about 54, according to the record. So when they looked at these two things, they have no option than to relocate the host communities than actually putting in 600 million US dollars over that. Also, if you look at the wood mining areas, the wood mining areas have actually cost more than 54 million US dollars to actually stop coal fires in 12 districts. So stopping the coal fire is not it's not an easy one. It actually causes a lot. And also, when this fire burns, if you look at that of the China that continuously looks some, though the China produces a lot per annum, but if you look at this, what they produce, they lose almost about 10% to coal fire annually. And if you check this in terms of what of this, if you are talking about $65 per ton of coal, you can see they are losing up to minimum of 0.50 million worth of coal per annum. So the value of coal loss also is something to consider when you talk about the economic implications. Then when we talk about the carbon credits, it's actually been designed in terms of it could be sold by different companies, so that this can actually be paid by various companies that are actually emitting coal, emitting some of these gases into the atmosphere for it to be used to replenish the environment in terms of afforestation, bringing in some certain lost oxygen back to their shape. So some sells at approximately about $12 per ton, for CO2. And if you look at the quantity of CO2 being released from uncontrolled coal fires, as estimated in my earlier slides, we have over 0.35. So this also alone that is actually being estimated can worth almost 4.2 trillion in terms of carbon credits. Some bigger companies are actually, what they do is they price their own emission and they spend money on emission reduction projects and as an offset. So this is some of the implication of coal fire, So now when we're talking about the mitigation, we'll run down this mitigation in terms of summary, in terms of how do you mitigate, stop some of the fires. Basically, you trench by trenching and using some of the incombustible materials, sealing the surface with soils that has some high water retaining capacity. We can also treat some pools of surface water also, and we can also deploy, inject some of inert gases and or in form of foam infusion to stop some of these fires. But if we are going to look at some of the locations or some of the case studies where some of these fires were actually being stopped, surface fires, and what is actually easily available in terms of coal actually catches fire in any of the mines around. So at least some of the small fires on the surface will be stopped with some water retaining, some of the soil that have some water retaining capacity. We can actually use them to actually stop it. Then if we look at the surface, for surface or near surface fires, we try to look at what actually happened in US. This fire was actually ignited by grass fires, and actually was actually stopped by just mere excavation, using excavator and dozer. So when the major thing behind it is that coal being the fuel itself, if we're able to make a trench beyond the coal seam, about some foot beyond the coal seam, you can cut off the fire from escalating. You can cut off the fire from actually moving from one coal body to another. So you can actually use the excavator and dozer. As soon as that is actually done, then sand or muddy kind of water could actually be used to actually, or some gravels also can actually be used, to stop some of these fires. But for some deeper fires, one of the best methods has been compressed air foam system, which is the CFS. This is actually working very well when it comes to deeper fires. What this actually involves is some of this has to be injected through the seals or some of the cracks, because when it comes to the underground fire, the underground fires actually needs to be sealed, or where the cracks or some of the openings that gives oxygen to the underground need to be sealed off. And when this is actually sealed off, what happens is that some of the heat being generated is being cooled at a certain temperature. When it's cooled at a certain temperature, the steam is actually being given off. And that temperature drops. When the temperature drops, definitely the fire, the combustion tends to actually decrease. So this is actually for most of our deeper fire. But most of the fires definitely will have in Nigeria are that of, definitely be that of the surface fires, which can actually be stopped using that of the muddy or sandy water to actually do that, or through excavation method. Then if actually this commences, the easiest way, which I know one can actually get involved with, is that of try to fill the gas exhaust cavities with sand, and you spray it with water. Now the heat of that the coal fire, along with the heat, once it's captured by the environment, will evaporize. Will evaporize the water. Then the wet sand in the exit vent will just block the flow of the gases. Then making the combusted gases or the steams to exit through some of the inlets, thereby minimizing the oxygen flow and fire tends to actually done. So this is one of the easiest way to fight fire, that is the immediate one to actually fight. The issue is timely, timely approach to extinguishing fire is very, very important, because once it escalates to a kind of medium to high nature of coal fire, it becomes more costly, it becomes more difficult to actually stop. Looking at this conclusion, we can say that the coal fires produces at least the greenhouse gases more, and emits more pollution, which is actually harmful to the atmosphere, to the soil, and to the human in general. Also, it is estimated that the CO2 equivalent emission from the worldwide is, increases, by 1%. At least that is man-made. And so for us to actually reduce this, we need to also work towards carbon credit, or some of the projects that actually can reduce the CO2 emission. And the low-hanging fruits, when it comes to extinguishing fire, that is the immediate short term, it's just extinguish the fire, because if you allow it to burn, the economic loss and the economic implications are very, very huge. There are also many methods of extinguishing coal fires, but many have been attempted. Some are successful, some are not successful. But at least the one that we know that you can actually deploy when it comes to that is adding some of the solid like sand, and some of the combining it with water to actually extinguish fire. I've got some experiences when I was working in one of the coal companies. We had some issues like this, and the stockpiles, our coal actually caught fire itself when temperature increases. And also in Nigeria, there's what we call, when you look at the lithological section of the coal geology in Nigeria, basically in that of Anambra Basin, before you get to the coal seam, there's always a kind of 0.3 to 0.4 overburden, like say, kind of, you are going to meet carbonaceous shale. The carbonaceous shale, the thickness is between 0.3 to 0.5. And this carbonaceous shale overlies the coal seam itself. So one of the measures that one actually needs to apply when it comes to actually excavating coals is to ensure that when you are taking off the coal, if exposing the coal for a longer term as an in situ, you don't need to actually remove the carbonaceous shield if you are not ready to win the coal immediately. Once you are not ready to win the coal immediately, the next thing is to make sure that you have at least minimum of 0.3 overburden above the coal seam. Because once you've actually excavated and because it's open cast, once you've excavated and the thickness of the carbonaceous shell is not within that limit, there is every tendency you're going to introduce much oxygen and expose the coal to heat. And when this is actually exposed to much heat, what happens that the coal will actually eventually catch fire, and that becomes an issue. There is every the government actually needs to monitor the illegal coal mining. Some people that are actually involved or get engaged in open cast mining system are not actually doing it in the right way. Some expose the coal, most of them dump the coal. Some expose it and they leave it there. At the end of the day, you see some of this coal burning. And also some of the fire, especially the wildfires, can actually catch coal. And some of the mapping we did some of those days, we encountered where some coal seam were actually burning in the bush, and they will be burning for weeks and nobody actually cared for it. And when some of these coals burn, the most important thing again, we need to know that they can create some sinkholes, because imagine when coal that is of a very high thickness burns, at the end of the day, they will leave some ash, some thickness of ash in between the overburden, and that creates some issues. So I think we need to also pay more attention on some illegal coal mining in the country, and this will also encourage the control emissions. I think for further inquiries, you can actually visit some of these addresses for some questions and also some contributions. And now I think we need to round up on this presentation and go into some contributions and some questions sections.